Now we are here on Daf Yudalid Amid Beis, and we're about to turn to Daf Tesvav. And the Gemara has a concept here of Vlad Pogum. So I just want to read to you a summary of the Mesifta regarding the concept of a Vlad Pogum. He says the following: L'divrei Beis Shammai, hi asur l'shuk be'isur lav losia eish samesh achutz lishzah. She's a tsaras erva. She's not allowed to get married without chalitza, and if she does so, there's a violation of a law, which we call Yevamot l'shuk. Kol hanolad mibias isur lav. Again, there's no mamzeris. We're not paskening like Rabbi Akiva that chayve lavim generate avlad mamzer. The afal gav she'ein avlad mamzer umuter bekol. If you're not a Kohen, you're allowed to marry this woman. Mikol makom mischalel hu lekahuna. He uses the masculine here because it could be the Vlad is a boy. But here he introduces a Kal V'chomer, which this bamboozles me. I mean, I thought this was all a D'Rabbanan, that D'Rabbanan were more machmir because Maila Asu B'Yuchs. So for example, you have a single woman who became pregnant that we don't know exactly who impregnated her, and she claims it was a Jew, and maybe it wasn't a Jew, and although maybe on a deraisa level, if the city is mostly Jewish, we can assume, and therefore my loss of the Yuchs is only D'Rabbanan, but he's introducing a Kal V'chomer from the case of Almana L'Kohen Gadol, Shekein ma almana she'ein isur noeg bakol ela b'kohen gadol bilvad. No one is prohibited from marrying an almana. No one, except for the Kohen Gadol. A Kohen Hedron is allowed to marry an almana. Imagine the case that we're dealing with in Masechet Yevamot. So a woman is married, we'll call her Rachel is married to Reuven. Reuven dies without children. Rachel gets married to Shimon. Shimon dies without children. She gets Yibum to Levi. It keeps going on and on. Or alternatively, at some point, the Yavam dies after he married her. I mean, she can marry a Kohen. She could have been an Almana times, who knows how many times over, but she's allowed to marry a Kohen. The only one individual on the face of the earth that she's enjoined from marrying is the Kohen Gadol. Nevertheless, Binah, if a Kohen Gadol would marry an Almana, the son of that marriage, mischalel lekahuna, he becomes excluded from kahuna. We're not allowed to get a Kohenes is not allowed to marry him, or if it's a girl, a Kohen is not allowed to marry this girl. Is Isha Asura b'chayve lavin she'isura hu l'chol adam? We always comparing two lavin. We say that a lav hashava b'kol is more chamor than a lav l'kohen gadol bilvad. Certainly, kol shkein she'b'na mischal l'kahuna. Now, this is a very, very strange Kal V'chomer. And I'll tell you why. Because forget about the Vlad that's born to a Kohen Gadol Almana. Talk about the Almana herself. If a Kohen Gadol marries an Almana, then immediately after he consummates that marriage in the first bia, she becomes a zona and she's excluded from kahuna. Now you ask me a question as to why Havlad is excluded from Kahuna. She's excluded from Kahuna by virtue of the Bia itself. In other words, a Bias Isur in Kahuna passes Kahuna. And the woman who has such a Bia, which is prohibited within the framework of Kahuna, she becomes a Zona, and she is enjoined for marrying a Kohen. So if a Kohen Gadol marries an Almana, and he dies, let's say, immediately after the first Bia, she cannot marry a Kohen. She herself is Mechulelis. Now you want to know about the Vlad? But not so in our case. In our case, we're not talking about a Chilul L'Kahuna, we're talking about a lav of Yevamot L'Shuk. And now you want to tell me, based on a Kal V'chomer from Almana L'Kohen Gadol, we could derive conclusions about Almana L'Shuk, about a Yevamot L'Shuk. I mean, you're really comparing apples and oranges. So this is a problem. But in any event, Rashi here in our sugya interprets the Gemara of Vlad Pogum, in the case of Yevamot L'Shuk, as a Doraisa halacha that's derived from a Kal V'chomer of Almana L'Kohen Gadol. It's not what I wanted to invoke, the principle of Maila Asu B'Yuchsin, where the Rabbanon up the ante on the laws of Mishpachos and Yuchsin for the sake of Kohen. Well, let's summarize now what's going on over here. We have a situation where Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is in a dilemma. What do we do for a tzaras erev? To publicize that she needs yibum, we're going to be generating mamzeris according to Beis Hillel. To publicize that she doesn't need chalitza like Beis Hillel, we're going to create a pagam l'kahuna according to Beit Shammai. So we're still looking for a common ground where we could issue some sort of a ruling which could be accepted universally by both Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai. Oh, Nisakin Lahem. So now Rabbi Yochanan Nuri comes up with a suggestion for a takana, litzaros, and now we're going to turn to Daf Tesvav. You choltzos v'lo misyabmos. Now we covered all our territory. Mimonefsha. According to Beit Shammai, she could fall for Yibum, but we're not going to allow Yibum because we're concerned with the Mamzeris according to Beis Hillel. So we'll allow Chalitza. Once there's Chalitza, she can marry anyone in the shuk. No problem. And according to Beis Hillel, the Chalitza is meaningless. It's unnecessary. But so what? We've covered the opinion of, we're showing respect for the opinion of Beit Shammai that she requires Chalitza. According to Beis Hillel, that chalitza, you'd have an interesting question here, whether or not you can make a bracha on that chalitza, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. I don't know. But be that as it may, we've covered all our bases. Lo espiku ligmar sadora chenitrufat shah. If this entire deliberation of Rabbi Yochanan Nuri never came to fruition, Amar lo Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So in Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel turns to Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and he says, "Ma nasa lahem litzaras harishonos me'ata." In other words, if we would have instituted your takana, Rabbi Yochanan, everything will be fine and dandy. We have chalitza without yibum. But you never got a chance to get this takana off the ground. And in the meantime, these Saras Erva went ahead and when they were misyabemes, based on Beit Shammai. In Beit Shammai's school of thought, that's what they paskin, and that's what happened. And again, this is all a proof tashma that Beit Shammai asul l'divrayim, because otherwise what's Rav Shimon Gamliel yelling about? His problem is the fact that in fact these Saros Erva went ahead and had Yibum. And therefore Me'ata, right now, what solution can you offer, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai? And again, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, is worried about Mamzeris. You see that Beis Hillel Shita is uppermost on his mind. So although we don't have an answer, we don't have any record of the response of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri to Rav Shimon Gamliel, and probably we could guess that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said, look, it's fafalin, it's too late. We can't do much to rectify the past, but at least from now on, let's put our front foot forward and try to institute this takon of chalitza. As far as those yibums that took place in the past with Taras Erva, we have no choice. Just have to notify Beis Hillel and try to, do damage control. But one thing is clear, that the entire brisa is assuming that Beit Shammai asu k'divrayim. Iyamit b'shlema asu hainu deka'amar. Now we understand Rav Shimon Gamliel man nasa l'tzaros harishonos. All those tzaros that were in fact misyabmos in the past. El iyamit lo asu. According to that sheet of that lo asu, what does it mean? Manasa li osan tzaros harishonos. Now, before we go on, and we're going to see how the Gemara deals with it, let me throw out one possibility. We find very often in Seder Noshim that there's something called the Horas Heter, which means that based on the evidence that is presented to Bezdin, they give a Horas Heter, and they allow a woman to get married. And the Horas Heter creates what's called a Chazak, a Cheskes Heter. So I'll give you an example. Two Eidim testify that Ruvain, the wife of Leah, died. In the meantime, Leah got married to someone else, and another two Eidim come, and they testified that Ruvain never died. And they contradict the first pair of Eidim. We don't know which pair of Eidim are telling the truth. We have no way of knowing. It's trey u trey. However, since there was a Horas Bezdin that allowed Leah to get married, that creates a new chazak. And what we're going to do is we're going to posit the first two Eidim against the second two Eidim, and they neutralize each other, stalemate. And then we're going to fall back on the brand new chazaka that through the Horas Heter, she now is an Eishes Ish to the second husband. And mitachas baila. We're not going to force the second husband to divorce his wife. We're going to allow and recognize that marriage, despite the fact that the two Eidim who's saying that she's married to the first husband. Now, why do I mention this to you? Because Rav Shimon Gamliel says, Ma nasa lahem litzaras harishonos. He might not be assuming that Beit Shammai asu k'divrayim. You can't prove from this statement of Rav Shimon Gamliel that in fact the Yevamot, based on the tutelage or the supervision of Beit Shammai, went ahead and got married to the Yavam, the Saras Erva. No proof of us. Even if Loas, Rav Shimon Gamliel still has a problem because of the Horas Bezdin. When Bezdin is approached with all the facts on the table that Reuven died without children, and he left two wives for Shimon for Yibum. One of them was an erva to Shimon, the other was a tsaras erva. Beis Din went ahead and gave a horas heter to allow the Yavam to consummate the marriage, Shimon marrying the wife of his late brother Reuven. Can we now undo the horas heter and say, no, even though we paskined that there is yibum, we're going to rescind and nullify that psak. We're not going to allow her to marry the Yavam, and we're going to require chalitza in light of and in lieu of the takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, which again never got off the ground, but hopefully we'll get it off the ground. So the Gemara says the following: Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. No, we're going to defend the Mandiyom who says Lo Osu Beit Shammai Kedivrei. Lo Nitzracha. So what is Rav Shimon Gamliel saying over here? That there's a problem of the Bnei Atzoros Arishonos that already had Yibum. If we're holding now Lo Osu Kedivrei, Lo Nitzracha El Itzara Atzma. This was the Rav Nachman that the Gemara had invoked on Amud Aleph, but we never on Yudalet Amud Beis, and we had never actually seen the statement of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak in its context. And he's saying, Hachi Kamar, Hanach Tsaros, de Beis Hillel. In other words, Beis Hillel would allow the tsaras erva to get married to someone in a shuk without any chalitza. And now you're going to require chalitza, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because of le Beit Shammai. Your choshesh that maybe that loch is like Beit Shammai, so she can't just marry anyone from the shuk without chalitza. Heichi navid lehu. What happens if she already got married without chalitza? So you're going to argue the lich litzu, let there be an implementation of chalitza now while she's married to another minat shuk. No. That's not a good idea. I understand that with all due respect, you want to satisfy Beit Shammai because you're trying to work it out that both Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai should be calm and collected and comfortable. But this is not a comfortable thing to require chalitza in the case of a married woman. Again, even according to Beit Shammai, she's a married woman. She wasn't allowed to get married, but the Kedushin Tofsin. And according to Beis Hillel, she was allowed to marry because the Tars Ever is Eina Misya Bemes. Now you're going to say, well, let's satisfy Beit Shammai and require chalitza. The Gemara says, Mimasei agavrayu. The husband is going to want to get rid of her. Why should he remain married to a woman who needs chalitza? Which means that she has a zikas yibum to another man. That's disgusting. I don't want to be married to such a woman. So in effect, you're really jeopardizing a marriage, which at least according to Beis Hillel is a valid marriage. I understand full well why you're doing so, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because you want to satisfy Beit Shammai, and technically the chalitza could be valid after she was married to someone from the shuk, but you are really endangering a marriage, which according to Beis Hillel at least is a valid and a happy marriage. Is v'chitem of a limason? Why do I have to be mityaches? Why do I have to care and be concerned with the emotional, response of the Baal we have to go ahead and do what we have to do. And if she needs chalitza, that's exactly what we're going to require. And here the Gemara invokes the passage to break up a marriage, to do something and establish a takonas chachamim that is going to threaten and to destroy a marriage. That's a violation of Drochei Darchino. The impression you get from this sugya, by the way, is that we pass like Beis Hillel, that even Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is only trying to satisfy Beit Shammai, and we're going to require, in other words, let me just see, if according to the logic which Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is rejecting, that we should require chalitza, right? You see, as a result of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's interpretation of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, we're going to invoke Drochei Darchei Noam here. Then it means that we're going to do away with chalitza, which means that according to Beit Shammai, she's living in sin with a shuk man, meaning this is a constant, ongoing violation of the doraisa of Yevamot shuk. How could you allow that for the sake of Drochei Darchei Noam? Drochei Darchei Noam is fine in a case where, let's say, you're going to cause undue suffering to a person. Or let's say you want to determine what exactly does the Torah mean by anaf eight avos? What is a lulav? So the Gemara says you have various possibilities, but some of these candidate lulavim have stickers, and not stickers, thorns, so it's a violation of Drochei Darchei. Now, all that I understand, but to allow an ongoing violation of a lav d'oraisa for the sake of Drochei Darchei Noam, that's out of the league. That's not on the radar screen. Are you in agreement with me? So that according to Beit Shammai, every single relationship between this Yevamot shuk and the shuk man is going to be a violation of a lav d'oraisa. You're going to say, well, let it go by. We're not going to require chalitza for the yavam because Drochei Darchei Noam. That's why I suggest that the Gemara really holds that that in this machlokes Beis Hillel Beit Shammai, we primarily accept the shita of Beis Hillel. Oh, okay, I didn't cheat. I was machavin to the Ritva. If you take a look in footnote number Zion, Mitch, you have the right. You have the footnote. Do you see where he quotes the Ritva number Zion? He says, "V'af she'ena dover mos ad kadesh nidche isur Yevamot shuk." According to Beit Shammai, you're overriding Yevamot shuk for the sake of mius of Drochei Darchei Noam. Mikol makom dai b'kach kadesh lo l'saken chalitza kidei lotzes gam yedei Beit Shammai sharei ikar alocha hi k'Beis Hillel. Yeah, that's the punchline. Summarizing the Gemara, we can still insist on maintaining the view that lo asu k'divrayim, and Beit Shammai would not actually implement a yibum between a tzaras erva and a yavam, but nevertheless, we still can explain this brisa from the perspective of Beit Shammai requiring chalitza, and Reb Shimon Gamliel is objecting because how can you require chalitza for the tzaras harishonos, meaning those who were already married, based on Beit Shammai, And if you're going to require chalitza, you are going to create a mius situation and perhaps undermine the marriage relationship, and that's a violation of drachar darchino. Toshma. Another proof that Beit Shammai asu k'divrayim, the Omar Avi Tarfon te'evni, evni is loshen taiva. I have a taiva. Mosai avot tzaras habas liyadi v'ase'enu. Wow. Yeah, you talk about Iker Alocha Beis Hillel, and look at what Rabbi Tarfon is saying. I would love to find a situation in which my daughter is married to my brother. He dies. My daughter falls for Yibum. He left another wife, a tzara, and I'm going to be miyavim the tzara. And Rabbi Tarfon is declaring he has a taiva to be Mekayim the Shita of Beit Shammai. So we don't have to get nervous about this because Rabbi Tarfon was in fact the Talmud of Beit Shammai. But you see one thing for sure, that Rabbi Tarfon anticipated that that's exactly what would happen if his brother was married to his daughter and he had a tzara as well. There would be evil. Because otherwise, what does it mean? Misavan. The Gemara rejects. Ema ve'asi ena. Asiena means that I will marry her off, meaning I'll be the presiding judge in the Bezdin. In the case of a tzara ever is going to come to my attention, I'm going to marry her off to a shuk because I paskin like Beis Hillel. So the Gemara says, "V'atei vani ka'omar." Why did Rabbi Tarfon get so emotional about this? He was all hyped up. He has a taiva, he declares. I mean, if he wants to be knowing like Beis Hillel, okay, that's not a chiddush. I mean, we all, except for the Talmid of Beit Shammai, we all pass like Beis Hillel. If, on the other hand, he desired to implement the halacha of Beit Shammai, then I understand why he gets all excited about this. He wants to demonstrate to the world that we pass like Beit Shammai. So the Gemara answers, you know why Rabbi Tarfon was ta'iv here, and he wanted to patter up this tzara like Beis Hillel without chalitza? La fuke min Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri would require chalitza, and Rabbi Tarfon had a taiva halacha l'maisa to say we don't accept Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and we accept Beis Hillel, hook, line, and sinker. This woman, this tzaras erev is patur from Yibum and from chalitza. There's no reason to require chalitza. Okay, I see it's getting late. I was hoping we'd finish this sugya, but we'll hopefully finish it tomorrow. Let's make a note of where we got up to here. Tashma. And tomorrow is Thursday, right? Oh boy, pen is in bad, pencil is in bad shape. Another one here. Okay. So we'll wish you a great day. Chodesh Tov. And, you know, the reason why